The backstage of a major comedy event has a specific quality in the hour before the show begins that is different from the backstage of any other kind of performance. In theater, that hour is disciplined and quiet. Final run-throughs, technical checks, the contained energy of an ensemble coordinating itself toward a collective outcome. In music, it is preparation of a different kind, the particular rituals of performers who are about to inhabit amplified sound in front of large spaces. Comedy is neither of those things. The backstage hour before a stand-up event is the space where comedians are most fully themselves, not performing, not preparing in any formal sense, but existing in the specific liminal state between the private person and the public one. With the knowledge that the show is coming and that the preparation is, at this point, complete or not complete. And either way, the show is coming. Steve Harvey and Katt shared that backstage space before a major comedy event in the mid-2000s. Two comedians whose careers had been built from different starting points, on different foundations, through different approaches to the form, arriving at the same corridor, the same green room, the same hour of waiting before the lights came up, and both of them walked on stage to do what they had spent their careers learning to do. The people on the production crew who were present during that hour have described it, in the fragmentary way that production crew members describe things they witnessed at industry events that are not the events they were hired to witness, as an hour that surprised them, not because of anything dramatic or confrontational, because of its quality of ease. Two people who had every reason to occupy the same space in the careful, calibrated, professionally cordial manner that the entertainment industry trains its members to use when sharing rooms, and who instead simply talked. To understand why that was surprising, it helps to understand how different Steve Harvey and Katt were from each other as comedians, and how that difference in the backstage hour before the show turned out to be something other than what the surface of it implied. The conversation that developed in the backstage hour before the show has been described by the people who passed through it as something that moved through several registers, from the ordinary talk of professionals who are about to work and are managing the particular pre-performance energy that work of this kind produces, to something more considered, something about the craft itself, about the thing that both men were about to go do in their different ways, and about what the doing of it requires that the not doing of it can never fully account for. Steve Harvey spoke at one point about the audience, about the specific relationship between a comedian and a room that is different from any other performer-audience relationship, the immediacy of it, the directness of the feedback loop, the specific vulnerability of standing alone with nothing between yourself and the people in front of you except what you say and how you say it, and whether the room decides that what you've offered is worth giving its laughter to. He spoke about this with the authority of someone who has also performed in the mediated space of television, where the feedback loop is delayed and filtered, and the room that judges you is invisible. The stand-up room, he said, is different. It has no filter. What you get back from it is exactly what you put into it, measured in real time. Katt received this, not as new information because it was not new information to him, but in the way that information you already have takes on different quality when it is confirmed by someone whose path through the same knowledge has been different from your own. The confirmation that arrives from the same direction you came from is reassurance. The confirmation that arrives from a different direction is something more interesting, evidence that the thing you know is true in ways that extend beyond your own experience of it. The backstage hour ran down. The production schedule moved the conversation toward its close in the way that all pre-show conversations are eventually moved toward their close by the inexorable approach of the moment when the lights come up and the work begins. Both men collected themselves in the private way that performers collect themselves before they walk out. The particular shift from private person to public performer that happens in the last few minutes before a show, and that no one outside the backstage corridor ever sees. Steve Harvey had built his career through television as much as through stand-up comedy, through the specific platform that a long-running television presence provides, the kind of visibility that converts a comedy voice from one that an audience seeks out to one that an audience encounters, whether they sought it out or not. The Kings of Comedy tour and its accompanying film had given him a scale of exposure that most stand-up careers never reach. His hosting work had given him a different kind of exposure, the kind that comes from being present on a screen in living rooms in a sustained and recurring way, building familiarity over time rather than through the singular intensity of a live performance. The stand-up, underneath all of that, was the thing that the television presence was built on. The observational intelligence, the timing, the specific understanding of how a joke finds its way to the people in a room who are ready to receive it. Steve Harvey understood this foundation with the clarity of someone who had never stopped using it, even as the form of its public expression had shifted from club stages to arenas to television studios. The foundation didn't change. The room just kept getting different. Katt Williams's career, by contrast, had stayed closest to the form itself, the stand-up special as the primary vehicle, the live performance as the place where the work lived. His television work existed, but was not the center of gravity the way it was for Steve Harvey. What he was building in those years was a body of live performance work, a catalog of material delivered to rooms of varying sizes with the specific consistency and distinctiveness of voice that makes a comedian's work recognizable as their work, regardless of what room it happens in. Those are two very different relationships to the same form, one in which the form is the center and everything else orbits it, one in which the form is the foundation and other things are built on top of it. And in the backstage hour before the show, with both men holding the particular stillness of the hour before performance, those two different relationships turned out to have more to say to each other than the surface difference implied. Both men performed that night. The people in the audience for the event saw whatever they saw, the public versions of two comedians who had, an hour earlier, been in a backstage corridor being private with each other in the way that people are private when they are not yet performing and the show is still an hour away. What the audience did not see was the backstage hour. This is always true. The audience never sees the backstage hour. But there is a sense in which the backstage hour is always present in the performance that follows it, in the way that the private life of any work is always present in the public expression of it. Not visible, but present. Not directly accessible, but there, in the quality of a performer who arrived at the stage having been in a specific kind of space with a specific kind of person for the hour that preceded it. What the backstage hour between Steve Harvey and Katt Williams produced in each man is not something that can be extracted from the performances that followed and held up as evidence. That is not how the influence of a private conversation on a public performance works. What it produced was subtler than that, a particular quality of being ready that the hour of conversation had shaped in ways that the performance itself couldn't document, but that the people in the room could feel. The comedy event proceeded and concluded. The backstage corridor was cleared, and the production was struck, and the space that had held both men for an hour became the space that it always was between events, empty, functional, waiting for the next use. But in the hour that it held Steve Harvey and Katt Williams before the show, the backstage had been something else. The place where two very different careers in the same form found, in the particular ease of talking to each other before the work began, that they had more in common than their public difference implied. The private version of the craft. The conversation before the lights come up. The backstage hour that nobody bought a ticket to, and that both men needed more than the show.